The snowball effect came, everything rolled up too fast, and before you know it, you're down 19, 20 points. It was just a bad, bad night on the worst day possible in the Game 7.
In the Clippers' Game 7 loss against the Denver Nuggets, James Harden recorded 7 points on 2 for 8 shooting. Though he did sprinkle in 13 assists, Harden has developed a reputation throughout his career for severely underperforming when it matters most. And nothing matters more than Game 7s. In his previous Game 7, it was back in 2023 as a member of the Sixers. He recorded 9 points on 3 for 11 shooting. In the Game 7 before that, it was in 2021 as a member of the Brooklyn Nets. Harden recorded 22 points, but shot just 5 for 17 from the field, and a putrid 2 for 12 from 3. Maybe he gets a pass for this one since he was playing through a hamstring injury. Before that, the 2020 first round, Game 7 against Oklahoma City, Harden scored 17 points on 4 of 15, 1 of 9 from 3. Game 7 against Golden State in 2018, 32 points, 12 of 29 from the field, 2 of 13 from 3. That was the game where the Rockets missed 27 straight threes. In 7 Game 7s throughout Harden's NBA career, he's averaged 19 points, 8 assists on 35% shooting, and 22% from 3. Could you simply point to small sample size as the reason Harden's numbers are atrocious? Not just atrocious, but abnormally bad. Maybe it is small sample size, but it's not only Game 7s. It seems like a trend with his entire playoff career that Harden doesn't exhibit the same fire, the same energy and motivation to win when everything is on the line. In fact, he looks like a completely different player, passive, slow, sluggish, and a total disinterest when the stakes are at its highest. In this video, let's dissect Harden's playoff career in reverse chronological order and examine every important series he's participated in, and the impact they had on his reputation over the years, which ultimately turned him into the Karl Malone or Charles Barkley of the modern era. A former MVP and the best player of his generation without a championship. The importance of this playoff series for not just Harden's legacy, but the entire Clippers franchise, it cannot be understated. The Nuggets had a tumultuous end to their regular season with the firing of their head coach of over a decade, plus the dismissal of their general manager, Calvin Booth, and a highly inconsistent roster that looked like Jokic was the only one trying to win. The Nuggets were discombobulated, to put it lightly. The expectations for them were much lower than the previous couple years. So this was the best chance anyone had to take them out. For the Clippers, it seemed like they were finally hitting the gear at the right time, with a healthy Kawhi Leonard for the first time since 2021, and a rejuvenated James Harden, who beat the allegations of regressing in Philly. Ivica Zubac registered by far his best season ever, and Norman Powell, at the age of 31, also had the best year of his career. Heck, even the once-forgotten Chris Dunn looked like an All-NBA defender. There was no better opportunity to make a deep playoff run than right now. And perhaps their final opportunity.
I know it's late, but you did play 47 minutes. There was a yawn in there. You got some energy.
Tired.
Yeah.
A little bit.
You got another 47, 48 in Denver?
Got to.
Or is it?
Yeah, have to. Like, it is what it is. You know, I miss a part of it, so.
In Game 6, Harden played a game-high 47 minutes and had a pretty good game, as the Clippers tied the series 3 games apiece. However, despite his clear notion that he has more in the tank and he will play as much as possible in Game 7, Harden looked exhausted right out the gates, a trend that stuck with him for his entire career. Before Zion Williamson, before Luka Doncic, it was Harden, who everyone made fun of for being fat and out of shape. There was always some truth to it, and his pattern of regressing more and more as the series progresses is likely due to his conditioning. For example, here's a neat little piece of trivia. James Harden averages 22.6 points per game for his playoff career. He averages 24.2 points a game in games 1 through 4, but he only averages 21.1 points a game in games 5 through 7. And of course, as mentioned earlier, only 19 points a game in Game 7s. While I'm sure there's plenty of other superstars who experience a reduction in scoring as the series chugs along and they get tired, this is a pretty noticeable drop-off, even for Harden. With the Clippers' loss to Denver, I believe it marks the end of the Clippers' relevance. With all their health problems and injuries over the years, this one year when everything was going so great, they blew it, and Harden is, once again, the one to blame. 2024 Clippers vs. Mavs. Not much to say here. This series, like the Nuggets one, was supposed to be evenly matched, and it was, for the most part. Harden had a pretty good series until Game 6, their elimination game. The series was tied 2 games each at one point, but then in Game 5, Harden shot 2 for 12. And in Game 6, he shot 5 for 16. The Clippers lost Games 5 and 6, and that was it. I don't think this series deserves much of a discussion because the Clippers weren't really contending that year. With Kawhi playing on one leg, they didn't have a shot at the title either way. 2023 Sixers vs. Celtics. What happens when you pair a habitually underperforming superstar slowly exiting his prime with a habitually injured MVP in his prime? Well, you get the 2023 Sixers, a team that had a legit chance to win the championship if only 3 things happened. 1. Joel Embiid stays healthy. 2. Joel Embiid doesn't suck in the playoffs. And 3. Harden shows up when he's needed. And I know I said 3 things, but maybe don't have Doc Rivers be your head coach. Unfortunately, those 3 things tend to never freaking happen. I mean, kudos to Harden for having 2 40-point games, but his other 5 games were just abysmal and basically nullified his good games, and especially Game 7 when he completely disappeared. The sad part is, I think this is the one year where the championship was wide open. The parity across the league was at an all-time high. I mean, we had Denver as the #1 seed in the West with only 53 wins. We saw the 8th seed Miami Heat make an improbable run to the finals. The Sixers had just as much of a shot as anybody, and I think if Harden just had an average performance in Game 7, maybe, just maybe it wouldn't have been a blowout. 2022 Sixers vs. Heat. This was Harden's first year in Philly, but it was more like half a year, not even. He got traded at the deadline from the Brooklyn Nets, and as always, there's an adjustment period. Still, the Sixers entered the playoffs tied for the 2nd best record in the conference, with just as much of a shot as anybody. In the deciding Game 6, when the Sixers ultimately met their demise at the hands of the Heat, there was a striking issue that folks started to realize in regards to Harden. When the pressure surmounts, it's not just his shooting that suffers, but he stops taking shots altogether, or at least he takes much fewer shots than normal. For example, that year, he averaged about the same number of shots per game as Jimmy Butler. But in Game 6, with Philly's playoff hopes hanging on by a thread, Harden took just 9 shots. 9, that's it. Butler, on the other hand, took 29 shots. Is it surprising though? One of the best conditioned athletes in the world has the ability to keep playing as hard as possible as the series progresses, versus Harden, who has a knack for slowing down as he gets more and more tired. There's no doubt in my mind that Harden wants to win, but perhaps it's less about the mental, but more about his physical. His body simply can't handle a long, grueling series. And this series against the Heat was strikingly clear. 2021 Nets vs. Bucks. Now, I don't really blame Harden for this loss because he suffered a grade 2 hamstring injury early in the series. The fact that he even played is a miracle, so when he returned for the final 3 games, he was hobbling up and down the court, and obviously not at full strength. The reason I mentioned this series is because this is one of the few times in Harden's career where he was on a team as the potential favorites to win the championship, or at least the favorites to come out of the East. Had the 2021 Nets not succumbed to injuries, that very well could have happened. This whole super team was arguably the most hated of this era, and likely the cause for the NBA to implement more strict luxury tax regulations, to make sure a team can't just buy their way into a championship. The Nets were a Kevin Durant shoe size away from capturing the title. Looking back, imagine the reaction of the fans if this team actually won the championship. Oh, the meltdown would be glorious. 2020 Rockets vs. Lakers. Definitely the most intriguing year for Harden, for several reasons. The pandemic, which halted the season. The Chris Paul trade that sent him to OKC while Westbrook arrived in Houston, as he would play his first and only season as a Rocket. It took a while for them to get used to playing together again, but in terms of scoring, this was actually Westbrook's most efficient season outside of OKC, and the two of them improved their chemistry as the year went along. Many thought that the extended duration of the season getting suspended would cause a lot of players to come into the playoffs out of shape, Harden included. A guy who's well known for partying in the offseason, you'd imagine he'd come in very out of shape. However, Harden was surprisingly in better shape than before, and his 2020 playoff run turned out to be a top 3 postseason of his career. Now, the downside is not many folks tuned in that year just because the bubble playoffs were not as exciting to watch with no fans. And for the Rockets, they traded away Clint Capella at the deadline. So they entered the postseason severely undersized, with PJ Tucker and Robert Covington taking turns playing center. Heck, James Harden himself spent time guarding Anthony Davis. The Lakers' size was too much, and they feasted on the much smaller Rockets. Overall, Harden had a great playoff run, even if the Rockets had too many flaws that year. 2019 Rockets vs. Warriors. The 2018-19 season was Harden's highest scoring year, averaging a whopping 36 points a game, the highest since Michael Jordan in 1987. However, for much of the year, Chris Paul was injured, and he struggled to play like the Chris Paul we all knew. While Harden elevated his game to new heights, this also happened to be his worst supporting cast in probably his entire time in Houston. With CP3 struggling to recover, Harden's second and third options were Eric Gordon and Clint Capella. The fact that he was able to carry them to 53 wins was unbelievable. This was Harden at the peak of his prime, yet sadly, it's nothing more than a blip in the history books. 2018 playoffs, Rockets vs. Warriors.
Here's Harden with the drive.
Safe to say, it's been a long time since Harden's gone past the second round, but 2018 was the best chance he ever had at winning the title. Equipped with a fresh new MVP trophy, and even held a 3-2 series lead over the Warriors. What happened, though? Well,
They're going to have to take Chris Paul off of the court. Well, they might have to drag him because you know he's not going to come off the court. But he is hurt right now, limping, walking gingerly. Per game during the season, it's hardly forced to throw. And it's rebounded by the Warriors. Pass out.
Yeah, is there any more explanation needed? It was a catastrophic choke job in a season where the Rockets recorded the best record in franchise history. This Rockets team had by far the best chance of anyone to beat the team we thought was invincible. Alas, it didn't happen. Instead, this team will go down in history with their infamous record of missing 27 straight threes. 2017 Rockets vs. Spurs. The year of my favorite MVP debate ever. Who should win the MVP, Russell Westbrook, who averaged a triple-double on a 6 seed, or James Harden, who's putting up almost the same numbers on a much better team? Well, besides that incredibly toxic MVP race, it seems like these years when Eric Gordon was forced to be the second option, it didn't turn out well. They were also going through a transition period as they recently lost Dwight Howard. 2016 Rockets vs. Warriors, again. This time, it wasn't much of a contest. This was the worst year of Harden's career as a Houston Rocket, and it's not even close. This was the year when all his defensive lapses became recognized across every household in America. Also the year when he was in the worst shape of his life and didn't even make any All-NBA team, despite putting up pretty good numbers. That's how much the rest of the league, be it voters, fans, or the media, loathed Harden. They barely made the playoffs as the 8th seed, going up against the 73-win Golden State Warriors, with Harden at the forefront of their suffering. 2015 Rockets vs. Clippers and Rockets vs. Warriors. Is it weird that ever since James Harden left OKC, he only reached the conference finals twice? The 2015 season featured Harden's first of many second-place finishes in the MVP race. But more importantly, it displayed the first time that Harden's hunger and desire to win was called into question. With Game 6 on the Clippers' home courts and the Rockets' hopes for the title fading away, they sparked the most incredible comeback that I've ever seen.
A 5-point game. Smith on the drive. He's feeling it. Josh Smith has made this a 3-point game. He's back behind the play. It's 5-on-4. It is Brewer, and we're tied at 102.
Even more incredible, however, was that they made this comeback with Harden sitting on the bench. Can you imagine that? Your superstar, your franchise player had already given up, while the coach put in the third stringers in an effort to inject some urgency to this team. When Harden got benched, the Rockets were down 17 points. Then they proceeded to outscore the Clippers 47-18, led by Josh Smith, of all people, along with a feisty squad of role players who were far more hungry and desperate for the victory than James Harden ever was. When the Rockets eventually completed the 3-1 comeback to move on to the next round, awaiting them were the newly minted Golden State Warriors. Harden, unfortunately, showed off his vanishing act for the first time in a Rockets jersey. Game 5, he scored 14 points on 2 for 11 shooting. With his season on the line, this is what he mustered up? In hindsight, perhaps the 2015 playoffs should have warned us that the greatest shooting guard of his generation had issues performing in the clutch. Some say it's his whistle and the way he gets officiated changes in the playoffs. So Harden is still trying to do his usual foul baiting tactics, but the whistle isn't there anymore. I've seen him try to do that and force a foul, but when he gets no call, he's completely out of the picture on defense. Prior to 2015, Harden also had some other moments that make you think he should be better. Like in the 2014 playoffs, he got outplayed by Damian Lillard, who was in his second year in the league. Or in the 2012 finals, when Westbrook and Durant needed him, he was nowhere to be found. With all that being said, Harden is undoubtedly the third or fourth greatest shooting guard of all time, and his longevity is quite underrated. It's just the sheer number of times he underperformed is daunting, more so than any other superstar of the modern era. In the future, this will make his legacy far tougher to evaluate, as fans tend to remember the bad parts of a player as opposed to the good. Plus, it doesn't help that his lowlights will be available on the internet forever, so future generations will see all his flaws. It's funny to think about that his Clippers 2025 season, like, oh, Harden is finally back and he's having a resurgent season. And he was even good in the playoffs until the deciding game, when it finally triggered everyone's memory that Game 7 Harden is not a great thing to see. Anyway, that's all folks. Let me know your thoughts on James Harden. I know he's still an all-time great, a for sure first ballot Hall of Famer. But it's moments like this that make people wonder, will he ever win a championship without ring chasing? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.